Thank you for tuning in to the Keeping It Real with KC podcast, a no judgment zone podcast that covers lifestyle, entertainment, news, and sports. Even though KC doesn't watch sports, but these are minor details. By the way, he reads tarot cards too. Yes, I really mean it. He reads tarot cards too. And now, the host you've tuned in for, KC Phoenix.
Good morning and welcome back to the Keeping It Real with KC podcast. I, of course, am your host, as you can see watching this, those who are watching, KC Phoenix. And this is my daily thought. I'm still waking up a little bit, which, by the way, my goal is to do a few episodes this weekend. I really want to do at least 2 sports episodes this weekend. I haven't done a sports episode in forever. So I really want to do that and get that done. But in the process of waking up, because I caught up on some sleep. And for those who are new to the Daily Thought, usually I'll talk about what's going on and then I'll go into the daily thought. Hopefully this won't be that long. Sometimes they can be like 15, 20 minutes. Other times they can be like 30 to 45 minutes. But we'll see what happens. But yeah, one thing I noticed is that I need to catch up on my sleep because it's starting to get the best of me. And that's not a good thing. In addition to that, it's just a lot of stuff that I deal with, and not that I'm any different from anyone else, because we're all going through this thing that we call life. And not that it's a bad thing, it's just life. Stuff happens. You have good cycles, you have bad cycles, up, down, that's just what it is. So don't read too much into that statement. For this daily thought, I want to talk about a situation due to a conversation that I recently had. However, before I go any further, KIRWKC.com, main podcasting platform. This podcast is carried on Apple, Spotify, Google, iHeartRadio, Pandora, Overcast, Bullhorn, Amazon Music, Audible, and several other podcasting platforms. Please feel free to listen to this podcast on whatever platform is most convenient for you. KIRWKC on all the social media platforms. I had a conversation yesterday, and it was interesting because this is the thing. When I was a kid, and some of my longtime listeners know this, my granny, which is my dad's mother, or was my dad's mother, because both all my grandparents are gone now. But luckily, because my mother had my brother and I young, I actually got to spend a lot of time with my grandparents and also my great-grandparents too. My great-grandparents didn't pass away until I was like in high school or out of high school. So, yeah. But one thing with my granny, who I was very close with, super duper close. I still, and now, oh boy. Full moon coming up. This is why I'm extra emotional today. I did not expect it to hit me like this. Whew. Okay. I still miss my granny to this day. All right, let's pull it together. And when I would call my granny over the phone. I would talk to my granny for maybe 5 minutes or less, give or take. And, and this was even when I was older. I would just want to chit chat and talk. And my granny, she was never, now when I was at her house, oh my God, my granny could talk. She could talk. But when anyone called her, she didn't talk on the phone that much. She didn't talk that long. Sometimes she did. Now with my dad, she did have long conversations with my dad. But for the most part, with people, when they would call her, she didn't talk that long. Because she didn't have a lot to say. And I had a conversation with someone yesterday. And it's like, there's this movie, and I'm pretty sure I haven't done a movie recommendation for this movie, so I won't say what it is. But one of the lines of one of the characters in the movie, she always says, "Say less." So that's what she always says, and it's hilarious. She's like, "Say less." So obviously, me doing this show, I talk a lot because it's part of the show. I have to give my opinion. That's what I do. I don't judge people because, this is a no judgment zone. But part of the show is giving my opinion, saying what's on my mind, talking about what's going on in my life, giving opinion on, what's going on in other people's lives and so on and so forth. And not from a malicious point of view. I'm not malicious when I do what I do because I don't believe in that. I could be. However, I'm not. And yesterday, and not saying that this conversation, the person was being malicious. I'm not implying that. What I am saying is during the conversation yesterday, certain things were said, and it's like, did this really help the conversation? Was it one of the things, a truck's going by, probably the garbage truck, if you hear that in the background. If it's one of those things where you're having to ask yourself, does this help the conversation? Does this add to the discussion? Is what the question is. And I honestly feel where some people, they feel like they have to be right, or they feel like they have to make sure their point is heard. When really, what you're doing is you're creating a more toxic relationship with the individuals you're interacting with because you feel like you just have to make a point, because you just have to let people know what's on your mind. And what I'm saying during this daily thought is, say less. You don't have to say every single thing that's on your mind. You don't have to say it. Do I think a lot of things? Absolutely. Do I say a lot of things? No, I don't. That's actually why I don't interact with some people now, because they're salty because I don't talk that much anymore. I used to talk a lot all the time, where I would call people and we would just talk and talk and talk and talk and talk, whether we're talking about other people or, so on and so forth. And now I just don't do that anymore because I don't have anything to say. Especially with this podcast, it's like everything I say it on my show. So I've been the type of person where I say less now. And honestly, you're more at peace. Not everything has to be said. Not every battle has to be fought. I did a daily thought back a few months ago where the title of it, I believe it was a daily thought, or it might have been under the KIRWKC title. But regardless, the title was Put Your Sword Down. Put your sword down. Like, you have these people who are warrior-like mentalities, myself included, and I used to be like this, and still can be from time to time, but I've learned to manage it better. Where you have your sword, and after you finish fighting a battle, because you're so used to being in battle, you're so used to pushing your agenda or your thoughts out into the world, you're carrying the sword, and then it's almost like every single conversation you're going into, you're swinging the sword without any type of discernment. You're swinging the sword without any type of what's the word I'm looking for? I need a word. I don't want to say clarity, even though thank you for that word, I appreciate that, but clarity isn't the word I want to use. There's another word. Without any type of, I'll just say without a reason. You're swinging your sword without a reason. You haven't determined who is friend and who is foe. Because you're so just concerned about swinging your sword. You're just so concerned about getting your thoughts out that you just have to let people know. You need to make sure they know this, or you need to make sure they know that. When really, they don't have to know anything. I remember something my granny said to me, and this is on the other side of this, where I was young, obviously, and I was complaining about having to learn something, and I'm like, I'll never need to use this. And my granny was like, sometimes it's just good to know. That's it. She's like, sometimes it's just good to know. You may never use the information, but sometimes it's just good to know. Now, I say that to say this. Some things I've learned in life, I know, and I may not have a use for it. Or there may be a situation where I have the information, but no one has requested it. Okay. I don't always step up and offer the information because I'm like, okay, well, I'm not going to do everything. And in addition to that, usually if people want advice or opinions, they'll ask for it. I do my best to monitor giving unsolicited advice, even though in my, I'll say with my usual relationships of how I interact with my friends, the dynamic of the relationship is I'm the advice giver, where people will come to me, they'll call me or what have you and say, hey, what do you think about this? And do that. And sometimes I will offer. I'll just say, hey, have you ever thought about this? I did that interviewing one of my guests, Jack, when who is an actuary and a soccer enthusiast and a book author. And we were talking and I had an idea and I was like, oh, something's telling me you may want to consider this. And then he's like, you know what? I never thought of that. And I was just throwing it out there. But it wasn't a thing where as soon as I had the thought, I was like, oh, you should definitely do this. And because no, just throwing it out there. And also I felt it was helping the conversation. It was raising the vibration, not lowering the vibration. And that's what I'm talking about. With what you're bringing to the table for your thoughts or your opinions, are you raising the vibration or are you lowering the vibration? If you take a step back and remove the ego from it, and there's nothing wrong with ego. I always tell people I have a huge ego and I own that. That's fine. But also, having a huge ego, you need to know when to monitor that and you need to own it. Because if you don't own it, you won't know how to check it. And one thing that I do is I'm like, okay, if I say this during this interaction with an individual or a group of people, and I'm not talking about on the show. I'm talking about in everyday life. What is it bringing to the conversation? Is it raising the frequency? Is it lowering the frequency? What's the outcome here? And if I determine that it's going to lower the vibration and lower the frequency, I say less. I'm like, okay. I remember I always use Whitney Houston for a lot of examples because I always tell people Whitney Houston is my muse. Her personality, her persona, and just her as a professional. She's my muse. And I remember an interview that she did with Oprah. And Oprah said something, and then Whitney said, when she was talking about the situation, Whitney's like, there's a lot I could say. That was a say less moment. Because when Whitney was doing that tell-all, because it was like a big tell-all event, it was a 2-day thing on Oprah. And Whitney Houston, talked about what happened between her and Bobby Brown. She gave her version. Because don't forget, there's 3 sides to every story. There's your side, their side, and then there's the Lord's side, which is the truth. But in the midst of telling all of that, she didn't tell everything. And she made that clear. She's like, there's a lot I could say. But she chose to say less. Because she didn't want to lower the frequency. She didn't want to make the relationship that she had at the time with her ex-husband and possibly her daughter as well, because don't forget, she had a child by Bobby Brown. So that there's a relationship there too. If she would have said other things that would have lowered the frequency, lowered the vibration, then it would have made the relationships more toxic and created more chaos between everyone. She removed her ego. Mind you, she's a Leo. And Leo is the ego of the between them and Aries. Usually I say Aries has the bigger ego, but really Leo is ruled by the sun. So, but Leos have ego too. But she checked her ego and decided to say less, is what she did. And that's where I have my moon is in Leo, allegedly. So I've learned to check my ego and say less. And like I said, it's thrown some people off because where I would just rattle off at the mouth. As a matter of fact, there's an example of this that happened recently with Ben Affleck. And I believe he was on Howard Stern, if I'm not mistaken. And Howard Stern asked him something about Jennifer Garner. And this isn't a dig at Ben Affleck. I'm just talking about the situation itself. And Ben Affleck said some things, and it was like, okay, did that raise the vibration? Raise the frequency? Or did it lower the vibration and lower the frequency? Sometimes say less. Because that's how I operate. The individual who I had a conversation with yesterday, when they were saying what they were saying, their little thing, because again, they have to make it clear how they feel about stuff. And there's nothing wrong with expressing your feelings. However, comma, when you express your feelings, will it lower the vibration or will it raise the vibration? Will it lower the frequency? Will it raise the frequency? You have to keep in mind what helps the relationship. Because there's a lot of things I could say to that person that would really lower the frequency and make the relationship, and not saying the relationship is toxic because I love the individual. I'm saying that if we really wanted to have a straight up conversation about things, then some feelings would be hurt. Like straight up hurt. Now, this is the other thing too. If someone asks me for my opinion, I always warn people, okay, you're asking about this. You want to know my opinion on something. Are you sure? Because again, I can always say what's on my mind. And I will do my best to do it in a considerate way, for the most part. However, some things, the truth is the truth is the truth. One of the best sayings I ever heard was by a comedian by the name of Eddie Griffin. And he said, the truth is like rain. It doesn't care who it falls on. So no matter how I attempt to deliver it and filter it, the truth is the truth is the truth. So if the truth is ugly, it's just going to be ugly no matter how much I wrap it up. When someone asks me for the truth about something, I do what I can to deliver it in a constructive way. But again, the truth is the truth is the truth. And as I mentioned before in previous episodes, I'm not one of those people where I talk about someone when they're not present, and then when they are present, I'm unable to say it. I'm not that person. Anything I say about someone when they're not present, I can say it while they're present. Let's make that clear, too, for those who are new listening to the show. But one thing that I've learned, and it has brought a lot of peace to my life, you would be surprised, is saying less. You would be surprised how peaceful my life has been because I say less. And it's thrown some people off that have known me for years, even decades, where they're used to me like I do on this podcast. But like I said, on this podcast, it's my job to do this. But privately, I don't say much to people. I don't talk on the phone that much at all. Not like I used to, because I don't have much to say. And I don't feel there's anything wrong with that. I feel saying less is a good thing. Also, it gives me a chance to observe people too, to see what they say and to see what they do. Because if you want to see what someone is about, sit back and don't say anything. And that's the other thing too. You'll have people in your life, the people who do not know how to put their sword down. And they will say stuff to see how you react. And when you don't react, when you're just like, okay, you're indifferent, it drives them crazy. They don't know what to do. Because some people do stuff just to get a reaction out of someone. Some people do stuff to prompt a reaction, to create a conversation, and then see what the rest of the group thinks. That's how some people operate sometimes, and do that. But when you don't say anything, it's like, they're like, what's wrong? You're not saying anything. No, I'm just listening. There's nothing wrong with just listening. There's nothing wrong with saying less. So, when it comes to certain things, take a step back and determine, Does it raise the frequency? Does it raise the vibration? Does it lower the frequency? Does it lower the vibration? If it lowers the frequency and the vibration, say less. And that is my daily thought. KIRWKC.com, main podcasting platform. This podcast is carried on Apple, Spotify, Google, iHeartRadio, Pandora, Overcast, Bullhorn, Amazon Music, Audible, and several other podcasting platforms. Please feel free to listen to this podcast on whatever platform is most convenient for you. KIRWKC on all the social media platforms. Until next time, be blessed.